You can print a color image through Lightroom, and it's much easier to print a color image through Epson Print Layout. But let me take you through the steps of printing a color image through Photoshop. I have the image loaded in Photoshop, and I'm on a Mac, so I would go to File, Print, or I can also do Command P. It'll bring up this dialog box. Now it's important to note that we are not yet in the driver. We're making settings still in Photoshop. When you download the driver directly from Epson, you'll have this full name here, but you could rename this, as I've done with these, to say P900, which we're going to print to. Wait on setting the print settings, and you want to now go to color handling. The options here are Printer manages colors and Photoshop manages colors. When we're working with color, we want Photoshop to manage colors. Then we have to select the printer profile. And it's very important to select the printer and the paper. In this case, we're going to be printing with Legacy Platine. One of the disadvantages of Photoshop is it will list every profile you have, whether it's a monitor-based or the different printers you have. Easy to make an error here by selecting the wrong printer and paper profile. So let's go. We want the P900, 700 Legacy Platine. And then we want to select the rendering intent. We have no way of soft-proofing the rendering intent. So if you haven't done this previously, what you need to do at this point is to hit Cancel. That'll take us back to Photoshop. We then have to go to View, Proof Setup, Custom, and it'll bring up this dialog box called Customize Proof Condition. All of this comes from the pre-press industry, and it's quite unintuitive in the naming conventions. The device to simulate is the printer and the paper we're going to be using. In Photoshop, every profile, monitor profiles will be in here. And if you have more than one printer, all those profiles are going to be there. So you have to make sure, and it's easy to make a mistake, select the profile and printer we want, Legacy Platine on the P900, 700. Now there are 4 rendering intents, but only 2 should be used for photography. Either perceptual or relative colorimetric. These are terms from color science and from pre-press proofing. They do not necessarily mean that, I perceive the way color should be, therefore it's perceptual, or they're relative to one another. Those are terms that have nothing to do with photography. Just focus on what these 2 terms look like when you toggle between them. Again, this is all based on having a monitor that is calibrated. So if we look at perceptual, we can see how the colors that are out of gamut, how they will remap based on the printer, essentially the ink of the printer and the paper one is using. It's always best to soft-proof an image versus trying to guess at what it should be based on some knowledge of color science or the belief that, perceptual is just the way to go, don't worry about it. Or, relative's the way to go, don't worry about it. Don't worry about what these terms are. Don't worry about trying to understand the science behind them. Simply choose the one that looks best. You can toggle between these 2. And for this particular image, I like relative because it's opening up some of the details in the darker colors. Black point compensation only works with relative. It is mandatory that you check black point compensation with relative. If you're on perceptual, black point compensation has no effect, but at the same time, it doesn't hurt anything, so it's just a good practice to always leave black point compensation checked for printing. And we'll have to start over again. If you're on a Mac, it would be Command P or File, Print. So we set the printer. Photoshop manages colors. It stayed sticky from before we did the soft proofing, and we now know that we prefer for this image relative. Make sure black point compensation is checked. And before getting into positioning and the sizing, now we go back up to print settings. And this will take us to the driver. This is the Mac driver. It will look different on Windows. So we want to make sure that printer is set. And now we have to select the paper size. In this case, we're going to be printing to 17 by 22. And there's a flyout menu. If we're going to be using anything with borderless and auto expand, that's primarily for canvas. If you're doing rolls with the roll adapter on the P900, and if you're going to be using very thick papers and using the front fine art feed. For Legacy Platine, we can simply use 17 by 22 because while it's a thick paper, it's just underneath the thickness requirement to use the front fine art feed. We'll select that. Now we have to go to Printer Options, and we have to go to Printer Settings. Then we go to Media Type. Legacy Platine is considered a photo paper because it uses photo black ink. We select Legacy Platine. And the default here is to max quality carbon black. In order to get off of that default, you have to go to Quality Options, and then you can select if you want Black Enhance Overcoat as an option. This is at 5760 dpi. PPI is related to the file, DPI is related to the printer. You can run tests, and you might find that 1440 produces almost the same quality as 5760. 5760 will be slower, but a common misperception is that, oh, I'm going to save ink by going to 1440. But in this case, let's go with 5760. Black Enhance Overcoat is primarily for high gloss papers. There are times when it does make sense to use Black Enhance Overcoat on a paper like Legacy Platine or Luster. But in this case, I'm going to turn that off. You can leave high speed on, meaning the printer will print in both directions, and that will increase the print speed. And in most cases, you want to turn Finest Detail off. Finest Detail is primarily for vector graphics. Now I click OK, save, and now we're back in Photoshop, and here we would adjust the sizing. We can do a scale to fit. You can also grab a corner and visually size things. Let's put this at 20. You have other options here of adding corner crop marks and registration marks. But let's leave those alone. And now finally, we're ready to print.